Thank you, Brian, and thank you for having invited me. I'm very happy and proud to be able to talk to you today. It's something completely different now, different to what we have heard so far. Insofar that I'm not focusing on a certain material or on a certain group of objects, but I've tried to meet the seminar's theme by focusing on a person, Rudolf II and his art collection. The interest in Rudolf II and his art collection is a long-lasting phenomenon. Historiography has characterized him alternately as a highly educated personality endowed with grandeur, as an eccentric with peculiar interests, as an incompetent ruler who isolated himself and turned to science and art, or as an unsteady hermit oscillating between generosity and mistrust. All these images are, of course, always an expression of the respective time from which they were made. When 19th century historians attest political inactivity to the emperor, this says probably more about the mood of the time of industrialization than about Rudolf himself. And if we emphasize Rudolf's patronage and scientific interest more strongly today, that also says a lot about us and our times, and especially about our hopes. In this sense, we can consider whether the characterization of Rudolf as erratic and fickle was not more an expression of his time rather than an expression of his person. After all, he reigned on the eve of the 30 Years' War. The Turkish Wars accompanied his reign. Geographic expansions demanded attempts to bring clarity into an ever larger and more complex world. His time was anything else but clear, orderly, and decided. How could an ambitious ruler like Rudolf be so? When dealing with Emperor Rudolf II, we often encounter an interesting phenomenon. Anyone who has dealt with him intensively will not lose interest in him again so quickly. This is the case with my esteemed predecessor, Erwin Neumann or Rudolf Distelberger, and it's the case with myself. And it seems to be the case for two great Rudolf researchers of our time, Thomas da Costa Kaufmann and Karl Wotzelka. Da Costa Kaufmann wrote his dissertation, Variations on the Imperial Theme in the Age of Maximilian II and Rudolf II in 1977. Karl Wotzelka completed his habilitation in Austrian history 1 year later with a thesis on Rudolf's political propaganda. The one, Da Costa Kaufmann, is currently writing a biography of Emperor Rudolf II, and the other, Karl Wotzelka, has just published a historical crime novel set in the emperor's surroundings, Der Bezoar, the Bezoar. It begins in 1594 with the journey of a young Saltwalk official and his companion to Prague, where they witness a murder, and the story goes on. Today I also want to take you to a journey to the 1600s and to Prague, however, without murder and without fictional protagonists, but with real characters. Our travel companions will be the modernist ambassador Marcantonio Ricci and the Cardinal Alessandro d'Este. But first, let me briefly illustrate the political environment. European macropolitics was characterized by the long Turkish War. The Holy Roman Empire, and with it Emperor Rudolf II, saw themselves threatened by the Ottomans in the south and east, and by the French in the west. We see here the red line is the border of the Holy Roman Empire. Our travel companions and their surroundings, the Duchy of Ferrara, Modena, and Reggio, which is somewhere around here, also found themselves in a difficult micropolitical situation. After the main line of the Este had died out with the death of Alfonso II d'Este in 1597, his cousin Cesare had initially not been recognized as his successor. Therefore, the Este saw their legitimacy and territorial claims threatened by the Gonzaga, the Medici, and the Pope. the most powerful political players in Italy. Under these auspices, Cesare sent an envoy to Prague to clarify the possibilities and conditions for support from the emperor. It quickly became clear that this support would have to be paid for in Prague. Quote, "La strada sola dei denari è quella che ci può dare qualcosa di buono. The only way of money is that which can give us something good," he reported to his master. However, as the duchy was short on money, the ambassador Marcantonio Ricci suggested that the emperor be attracted to the side of the Este by donating horses, statues, and high-quality paintings. This is the setting against which we want to look at one facade of Emperor Rudolf II and his passion of art. Soon after moving the imperial court from Vienna to the Golden City Prague, he began to transform the castle hill of Rajany into a prestigious castle complex. The redesign of the residential wing was immediately followed by the buildings intended for the imperial collections. First, horse stables were constructed, above which were built two large halls for paintings and sculptures. This is a present appearance. It does not show the 16th century appearance. However, the illustration is intended to give an idea also of the dimensions. This is actually the residence of the emperor. These are the two new buildings which were built to house the collections. And this, we come to this in a second, because the emperor was able to enter these collection rooms by going through this so-called Gangbau, which was a 100-meter-long central wing. On the ground floor, this passageway housed the tech room. On the first floor, the Kunstkammer, and on the second floor, the picture gallery. If we in German talk of Kunstkammer, Kammer is a chamber, is something very small. And this room, this Kunstkammer, is anything else but small. The emperor himself was actually able to access his collections from his residential wings across the access to external visitors was via the entrance in the castle courtyard, the so-called mathematical tower, which was somewhere here and does no longer exist. This provided access to the 3 floors via an oval staircase, and probably, we are not very sure about this, it probably housed also an observatory. Laboratories, workshop, aviaries, animal enclosures, fish ponds and gardens with greenhouses completed the ensemble, in which visitors really must have had the feeling of entering a complex world of the extraordinary. The ordinary had no place in the imperial court. We'll come back to the content of the Kunstkammer peculiarities later, but for now I just want to note that no fewer than 37 cupboards, chests and numerous tables housed a vast number of exceptional unique items. For the time being, let us remain at the level of knowledge that most members of the influential and learned elite had around 1600. We have heard about the emperor's fabled legendary collection, but we don't yet know anything about it more specific, let alone that we've ever seen it. And that brings us back to our Virgil of the day, the Modenese ambassador. Modena's negotiation with the imperial ministers had meanwhile led to military support from the duchy in the Turkish wars, but without any progress being made in the emperor's recognition of Cesare d'Este and his territorial claims. Money was demanded, and above all, works of art. In 1598, breeding horses and stallions were finally sent to Prague, as well as paintings reportedly by Raphael and Titians. We're not sure if they were really paintings by Raphael and Titians. We read of many donations of Raphael, Titians and Michelangelo paintings, but we don't know if they were really proper, if they were really the authors of these paintings. And vessels made of gold and silver were sent to Prague. However, the statues and statuettes that the emperor had asked for were still outstanding. He wanted to have 2 female figures, one antique and one by the hand of Giambologna from the estate of Alfonso II. The emperor knew of their existence, but the heirs were unable to find them, and so they also searched in the estate of Cardinal Luigi d'Este in Tivoli, but without any access either. In the meantime, Rudolf's mistress and his minister, Liechtenstein, had also offered to put in a good word for Modena's side with the emperor. In return, they also expected various gifts: goldsmith art, ceramics, paintings, horses, but also sausages and truffles. The emperor himself was much more demanding and specific. He explicitly expected paintings by Raphael, Correggio, and Michelangelo. The emperor's interest in painting seems to have been so great at that specific time, as water in his gallery had destroyed many canvases over here. After shipments of paintings in 1602, the emperor wanted one additional painting, namely one of the Principessa Giulia, Cesare's daughter, which we have seen already. The focus here was not on the artistic value of the paintings, of these various paintings. The emperor had heard of the Principessa's beauty and therefore desired her likeness. However, he disliked the painting sent to Prague, which must have been comparable to this one, which I'm showing here, because of the neckline of the sitter, which did not meet the expectations of the emperor. For the emperor, there was simply too little skin. So, Hans van Aachen, one of Rudolf's court painters, was sent to Modena to take care of the matter. In Modena, the painter was very well received. He also got further gifts for the emperor, a version of the so-called Letto di Policleto, probably similar to this one, a cyclops head, an antique statue, most probably the so-called Ilioneos, which is today kept in Munich, and further unspecific paintings. Hans van Aachen now became the key figure and the main mediator between Modena and Prague. Even though the painter's mediation activities are extremely interesting, I must shorten a little here. It should be noted, however, that the gifts from Modena did not stop. A large number of cameos were given. Further pictures followed in 1604. It is already the fourth extensive consignment to Prague. This consignment also included medals and, above all, a bronze by Giambologna. It was most probably the allegory of Francesco I of Medici from our collection. In the report of the envoy, Manzuolo, we read that of the emperor's great joy, quote, "Si allegrò infinitivamente," as he had already possessed a copy by one of Giambologna's pupil, and now finally saw himself as the owner of the original. Quote, "At last it is mine, bring it to my chamber. Questo è mio, portamelo in camera," would have been the emperor's words. And then he is said to have placed it personally on a desk in his Kunstkammer. Regardless of whether the bronze is the relief in question, scholars are not entirely in agreement on this. This anecdote shows the emperor's ambition as well as his love for art, which had very little to do with representation. The fourth consignment of work of art seems to have finally prompted the emperor to express his gratitude to Cesare d'Este. He did it with a simple letter of thanks. After so many and lasting gifts of art, however, the emperor's gratitude and favor was not limited to Cesare d'Este. The whole family could now be sure of his favors. This is illustrated by a specific episode. Rudolf had heard that Cesare's brother, Cardinale Alessandro d'Este, wanted to come to Prague. Assuming that also this one would not come empty-handed either, he invited him to his court in August 1604. Magnificent banquets, hunts with leopards, and visits to beautiful women dominated the cardinal's days in Prague. And he was granted a very special favor, as Adolfo Venturi writes, quote, "What few were allowed, he was allowed. he was invited to visit Rudolf's Kunstkammer. And he reports, "I saw the paintings, which are admirable both for their number and for their quality, and also vessels made of precious stones of various kinds, statues and clocks, in short, a treasure worthy of its owner. By being allowed to see these treasures, the cardinal was one of the few who were admitted to the emperor's inner sanctum, his Kunstkammer. This impression that this favor was extraordinary is gained both by when reading historical reports and when reading the works of Venturi, Da Costa Kaufmann, and most recently also Barbara Gelfi on the relationship between the Este and the imperial court. In particular, one gets the impression that the entire past history, the buying of the emperor's favor through works of art, was necessary to enable the cardinal to visit the Kunstkammer. It really seems to have been the case, as Karl Wotzelka has his protagonist say in the historical crime novel, that hardly anyone had gotten to see the emperor's favored collections, and that the emperor was above all unwilling to, quote, admit high-ranking people such as princes of the empire, ambassadors from other countries, or nobles to his Kunstkammer if they did not show understanding and sensitivity of it. Appreciations and gift of art were door openers for Rudolf. The Modernist envoys had pointed this out, as had Hans von Aachen. In the case of the Este family, they had finally brought the desired political success, which was symbolically sealed with the reception of the Cardinal Alessandro d'Este in Prague. As revealing as this episode is for understanding the exclusivity of the Imperial Kunstkammer, it brings one question to the fore. If such a rich and comprehensive collection was so exclusive, what was it supposed to and what was it used for? I'm not the first person to borrow from 16th century England to shed light into this issue. I refer to the Gesta Graeorum, or the History of the High and Mighty Prince Henry by Francis Bacon. An entertainment performed in 1594 at Gray's Inn here in London. You know the content probably better than I do, but I will go into it briefly. 6 chancellors give Prince Henry their recommendations for a good government, one after the other. The second chancellor speaks about the importance of the study of philosophy. He suggests that the prince should devote all his efforts to bringing the hidden secrets of the world to light. For Bacon, this would require 4 things. Quote, the collection of a most perfect and general library. Next, a spacious, wonderful garden with botanical and zoological grounds. With this, the prince may have in a small compass a model of universal nature made private. The third, a godly huge cabinet wherein whatsoever the hand of man by exquisite art or engine hath made rare in stuff, form or motion, whatsoever singularity, chance, and the shuffle of things had produced, whatsoever nature hath wrought in things that want life and may be kept, shall be sorted and included. Fourthly, all this was to be completed by a laboratory. This would create a place of thought that would contribute to deciphering the natural causes of things, of the world's mysteries, actually. In my view, this is the best and most accurate description of the function of a place of art and science as it was found at the court of Rudolf II. And if we take Bacon's explanation of why such a place would be necessary to unveil the secrets of the world, we also understand why Rudolf's collection had to remain exclusive and inaccessible to most people. Bacon has the chancellor say that if the prince could solve all mysteries and riddles by revealing their natural principle, he himself, quote, shall be left the only miracle and wonder of the world. In the end, This is about power through knowledge and the sovereignty of interpretation. This was precisely the declared strategy of in Habsburg circles since at least 100 years earlier. In Emperor Maximilian's autobiography, The Weisskönig, we read of universal knowledge as a guarantee of good government and the preservation of power. I'm quoting, "For kings who rule themselves must know more than the princes and the people, so that their subjects continue to be ruled by them." This will not have been Rudolf's first motivation for amassing his immense collection, but it was a good Habsburg tradition. In Rudolf's case, it seems that this was precisely where the requirements of office and his personal preferences met. He used art and science not only for a reason of power politics, but, so it seems, primarily out of personal interest and curiosity. This ultimately manifested itself in the search of the beauty of the whole world. This formula, the beauty of the whole world, was used by one of Rudolf's personal physicians, Anselmus Boëtius de Boodt. In the dedication of his main work, the Gemmarum et Lapidum Historia of 1609, he writes that his employer, Emperor Rudolf, surpassed the other princes not only in dignity, majesty, wisdom, and knowledge of the world, but also in the interest of precious stones. He would love them, however, not in order to increase with their help his own dignity and majesty, the greatness of which does not need any external support, but rather in order to contemplate in the precious stones the greatness and unspeakable power of God, who in such small bodies unites the beauty of the whole world. Totius mundi pulcritudinem. And enclosed the power of all things. Thus the emperor always has a certain reflection and glimmer of divinity before his eyes when looking at his gems. This brings us directly to the epicenter of the Rudolphine Kunstkammer, its inner understanding and its inner logic. The idea that, as de Boodt writes, the beauty of the whole world manifests itself in the smallest of bodies is expression of the doctrine of signature, the idea of the parallels between the macrocosms and the microcosms. I'm using the plural on purpose, and of a pansophic worldview that characterized the milieu of Rudolf II and Prague around 1600. This is intensely evident in the precious stones. In their artful carving, we find the interplay between art and nature we have heard earlier this morning, which was so characteristic of this period, directly expressed. Even if de Boodt may have exaggerated when saying that no emperor ever had such a large collection of precious stones as Rudolf II did, this cannot be entirely dismissed. In the inventory of his Kunstkammer from 1607, 1611, we encounter over 250 objects made of precious stones in the main room alone. This does not even include the objects set with precious stones, nor the pieces that were in the other rooms of the Kunstkammer. At least 300 cameos, over 500 unworked and unprocessed minerals, as well as 12 sacks and 4 chests with agates must be added. The exact amount of his immense collection can, however, not be reconstructed, as even the inventories capitulated to the sheer quantity and could only provide approximate information. So we read, for example, very often of several pieces of jasper or several vessels made of agate, without each piece being listed individually. And I must confess that at some point I also stopped counting. But it's without question that the amount was enormous, and that the quality was not inferior to the quantity becomes clear when we look at some individual pieces from this collection. One spectacular example is the incomparable Gemma Augustea, which Emperor Rudolf II is said to have purchased for 12,000 gold coins, and which is now part of the collection of Greek and Roman antiquities of our museum. Equally unique is the monumental agate bowl, one of the two inalienable heirlooms of the House of Habsburg or the House of Austria, measuring 58 centimeters in diameter and 76 including the handle, so we talk about something like this. It was cut from a single massive block of agate, probably in Constantinople in the 1st century. It was considered priceless due to its size and masterly workmanship. Its uniqueness was further enhanced by the fact that it was also seen as a natural wonder. The name of Cristo, is said to be read in the veins of the stone. We see it, I hope you can see it here in this print. Thus the bowl could be seen as an example of creative nature, natura naturans and natura ludens, and of the interplay between art and nature. Rudolf had kept this inalienable heirloom as the eldest member of the family before it passed to his younger brother, Matthias, after his death. Until recently, we had also assumed that the Dragon Bowl by Gasparo Miseroni was a heirloom. The reason for this assumption was the fact that Rudolf's father, Emperor Maximilian II, had already ordered vessels from Gasparo Miseroni in the 1560s and 1570s, and that's the period in which we can date this very vessel as well. However, together with the large basin made of lapis lazuli, the Dragon Bowl is still found in 1598 in the inventory of Catalina Michaela de Austria, the daughter of Philip II of Spain and the Duchess of Savoy. So it can therefore not have been from Maximilian. We find it 1607 in the inventory of Rudolf. And here one can imagine also a similar acquisition process as which the Este editions described in the beginning. In other words, they were probably somewhat forced gift intended to gain favor. However, Rudolf's Glyptic collection had not only grown through inheritance or through his gift policy, he also increased it through own production. He systematically had searched for stone deposits in his territories, especially in Bohemia and in the Palatinate. At the same time, he brought skilled experts from all over Europe for the individual states of stone processing to Prague. These specialists came from Germany and Italy and were able to produce extraordinary vessels and cameos for the emperor and to bring the art form of commessi di pietre dure to its peak. Caspar Lehmann, Ottavio Miseroni, and Cosimo Castrucci are the best known, but by no means the only stonecutters at Rudolf's court. To Caspar Lehmann, we attribute the intaglio, the ornament of this bowl, while the bowl itself is attributed to the workshop of Ottavio Miseroni in Prague. Ottavio also made a large chalcedony jug, which was later completed with a wonderful goldsmith work by Paulus van Vianen. Van Vianen from Utrecht succeeded Jan Vermeyen von Antwerp as a court goldsmith after Vermeyen's death. We will say more about Vermeyen later. At this point, I note that the tazza with which my lecture was announced, this one here, was a result of a collaboration between this goldsmith, Jan Vermeyen, and Ottavio Miseroni. These examples also reveal a specific feature of Prague court art, which is expressed in the close interaction between the artists and scientists working at court. The artists of the various professions worked in relative proximity to each other, inspiring and influencing each other and also drawing inspiration from the rich collection. And like others, the artists, had access to them. In this way, the new things could be created through dialogue and through combinations. Caspar Lehmann, for example, transferred the technique of rock crystal carving to glass. This example from the Decorative Museum of Prague shows it, and claimed to have been the first one to use this technique, the wheeled engraving on glass. We know that this is not the fact, this is not true, but he certainly perfected the process of engraving glass and received an imperial privilege for it. The fact that Ottavio Miseroni did not only supervise his own workshop, but also the one of the Castrucci, where commessi di pietre dure were made, led to a combination of the cameo cut with this art form, the commessi di pietre dure. We will come to this in a moment, but first I will show you a small commesso panel signed by Cosimo Castrucci and dated 1596. This is an interesting piece because Rudolf Distelberger recognized in it a motivic innovation in the art of the commessi di pietre dure. Just as a quick reminder of the technique to create the ornamental or figurative images, thinly cut slabs of colored hard stones, we see different ones, were sewn out and joined together seamlessly to form the image. The internal drawing of the raw material is intentionally used as a pictorial element, as you can see here and everywhere. I'm showing you this one because it's the first known landscape depiction using this new technique. And it is significant that it was made just when Dutch landscape paintings, and especially paintings by Bruegel, came to Prague. The situation is similar with individual works by Ottavio Miseroni, such as this cameo depicting the Madonna, which would be almost impossible to imagine without knowledge of Dürer's Madonna with Child from 1503. We are now 100 years later, but if we consider that this painting was most probably acquired by Rudolf around 1600, we again recognize the collection as a source of inspiration for the artistic production at the court. The mutual influence can be seen in another signed work by Ottavio Miseroni. And this brings me back to my previous thought, namely that Ottavio had supervised the Castrucci workshop as well as his own one. With this work, he combined the art form of cameo carving with that of commessi di pietra dura. The individual different colors are not created by exploiting or using different layers of colors in the stone as artists do with cameos, but by cutting them out of different stones and combining them into a whole. However, they are not cut flat as in a commesso, but elevated as in a cameo. The combination results in what we call a relief commesso, a technique whose establishment dates back to Ottavio Miseroni. We also find borrowings of style and motifs in Ottavio's hardstone vessels. I think it's easy to understand which artist is my favorite one. These soft forms are reminiscent of Nicolaus Pfaff or again Paulus van Vianen. In view, if you look at this shape here, we find it exactly here. And this is made of soft gold, and this in extra hard stone. In view of the design of the hardstone as a soft, malleable material, one cannot help but think of alchemy. The alchemical idea and practice of reshaping material, transforming it, bringing it into another state, seems to have been translated into art in this vessel. This is just to remind of the omnipresence of alchemy at the court in Prague, which could not be without influence, of course. Seeing the large bowl with snake handles, we are certainly reminded of alchemical or pharmaceutical allusions. Although I cannot resolve them here, it's hard to imagine. These two snakes are coiled around a split branch, and there must be any associated specific meanings, which I don't know yet, but but we're working on it. The bowl itself is again made by Ottavio Miseroni. In the mountings, we recognize the hand of Jan Vermeyen. And both, like so many other works by Prague court artists, were created under the aegis of the watchful eye of the demanding emperor. We know from reports by Venetian and other ambassadors that the emperor preferred to watch the artists at work and spend a lot of time with them. Here too, we must assume that there was an exchange of idea and influence, direct influence. The extent of the emperor's influence can finally be seen in the most important work of the Prague court workshop, which was made for Emperor Rudolf, his own crown. This one is not signed by its maker, Jan Vermeyen, as one might assume or suspect. Instead, it bears the emperor's own signature. We don't see it yet, but now you can see here this inscription. I've written it above in order that you can read it. It reads, Rudolf II, Romanorum Imperator Augustus. The whole inscription reads, King of Hungary, King of Bohemia, constructed it in 1602. Construxit 1602. This is expression of the self-image under which much of the work in the emperor's Kunstkammer did or did not take place. And when we come back to Anselmus Boëtius de Boodt and the beauty of the whole world, it is precisely this self-image of the emperor, his intellectual and artistic grandeur, which places him above others. Also in artistic matters. Of course, we are moving with the crown on uncertain ground because it's not an obvious object for a Kunstkammer, and it was not kept in the room with the classical, typical Kunstkammer object as natural objects, scientific instruments, or works of art, but it was in an own room. Nevertheless, it combines elements of Kunstkammer objects in that it is much more than what it seems to be on a first view. On the first view, it's a simple insignia, a sign of sovereignty. It was made as a private crown for the emperor, and he had, and that's the new thing, he had himself depicted on it 4 times. What other crown do we know on which the wearer is represented in a narrative context? On Rudolf's crown, we see him as Imperator, here as general, as victor over the Turks, which get the laurel crown, as Augustus, as emperor, at his coronation in Regensburg. He's right now here coronated with the Reichskrone, as Rex Hungariae, as King of Hungary, riding on the coronation hill in Pressburg. We see him here. And as Rex Bohemia, at the coronation procession to the Hradzany in Prague. Here we see him. This is the Hradzany in Prague, where then the crown was kept also. These depictions are basically visual translation of the inscription on the arch, and they put it into a narrative context. And the inscription itself can actually be understood as a signature, as I have said, the signature of the inventor or the composer. It ties the crown to the person of Rudolf II, and the same does the pictorial program. This is absolutely unusual for an insignia, and it tells a lot of on the commissioner. This becomes particularly clear when we compare the crown to the scepter, which was commissioned by Rudolf's younger brother, Matthias. This scepter has no narrative content at all. It lives purely from the symbolism of form and materials. It does refer to the commissioner, but only in form of a hidden monogram. We can't even read it because it's underneath this goldsmith work. Only the artist himself left his full name on the piece, which we can read inside this one. Andreas Osenbruck, Facet anno 1615. This is quite different from the crown. The difference ultimately expresses the attitude with which Rudolf commissioned and collected art. It is his understanding that unites him as the most excellent person with the extraordinary of art and nature. His collection is a treasure worthy of its owner, as Alessandro d'Este had said. This may be the reason why the emperor's collection and his acquisition activities are accompanied by such a strong personal interest, and why we still recognize this personal touch today. In this respect, he was certainly on a different level to all the other Habsburg emperors. This allows us not only to see outstanding works of art when we look at pieces from his collection, we get also a glimpse of the inner motivation of the collector. As if this was inscribed in the collection, just like what the emperor saw inscribed in the precious stones, the beauty of the whole world. Thank you.